Welcome back. You're watching the India development debate right here on ET Now. I'm Supriya Shrinate and straight on to the big emotive issue of Sabarimala. It's back to square one, it seems, for now. In a major development, the Supreme Court today agreed to hear the review pleas on its September 28th order, throwing open the doors of the historic temple in Kerala to women of all ages. The five-judge bench, headed by Chief Justice Ranjan Gogoi, however, refused to stay its earlier order, even as it set 22nd of January as the date for an open hearing in the case. Interestingly, the judgment comes days before the beginning of the main pilgrim season starting next week. The top court's decision may have offered a glimmer of hope for the devotees of Lord Ayyappa, but it has surely complicated the job for the left-front government in Kerala, which has been caught between the rock and a hard place. For one, it is facing contempt of court petition over its failure to implement the order, and on the other hand, it may have played into the hands of BJP, which has been extracting a big political mileage by creating a divide between the Hindu believers and the so-called rationalists. The battle over Sabarimala has already become a hot potato in the politically sensitive state of Kerala, and all eyes are now on how Chief Minister Pinarayi Vijayan handles this issue. The Supreme Court's decision to hear the review petitions on its historic verdict Sabarimala and what it means to national politics is what we're discussing on this edition of the India Development Debate. I've got a stellar panel right here. Padma Pillai, spokesperson, ready to wait. Abha Singh, senior lawyer, and Surit Parthasarthi, advocate. So thanks each one of you for joining us. And Surit, if I may begin with you, the Supreme Court has finally agreed to hear the review petition on its previous order, which has opened and given a hope to some people out there. But would you say we are back to square one? And would you believe that the chances of this getting reversed are now high?
Not at all. I don't think we're back to square one. In fact, I would think that the chances of the judgment being reversed are very marginal and negligible. And the reason why I say this is that no doubt it's true that ordinarily review petitions get dismissed in the chamber itself, but the court hasn't admitted the petitions yet. It's merely said that it will hear the petitions in open court. But this, I think, is possibly a reasonable thing to do, given that there were more than 40 review petitions that were filed. And if the court were to merely dismiss these petitions offhand in chamber, it would be facing a whole host of complaints about how a fair opportunity was denied to a number of people who wanted the judgment to be reviewed. But I think that the judgment is otherwise unimpeachable. It is perfectly correct as a matter of constitutional interpretation, as a matter of statutory interpretation, and it's path-breaking in many ways. So the last thing we want is for the court to go back on a judgment which in many ways is transformative in nature, and which could serve as a sort of precedent to do away with a number of acts of discrimination across religions, across barriers, and try and bring about a future that is more equal, that is without discrimination, and that is without exclusion of different communities. So I would think that the chances of the judgment being reversed are still very, very negligible.
Okay, I'm not going to preempt what the Supreme Court will or won't do, but Abha Singh, on the 22nd of January, the Supreme Court will decide whether to admit the 49 review pleas against its September 28th verdict on the entry of women. Are they making a costly delay? And why did they have to take so much time to agree to even hear the petition is really the big question, given there is going to be a period where the peak season kicks in and it could be left to many interpretations.
Exactly, and when it has become such a massive law and order issue, I would say it is a revolt against the apex court's judgment. It is a law and order issue because even after Supreme Court allowing women to enter Sabarimala temple, not a single woman has been able to enter the temple. It is a big dent to the, I would say, the respect and sanctity of the Supreme Court. And in fact, it has not even stayed the order. As of now, women can enter the temple. And if the Kerala government does not ensure that women enter, I would say it is an insult to the Supreme Court, a contempt of court. More than 3,600 people have been arrested till now, but the situation remains grim. When on one hand you say it has upheld the constitution of the country, then why women are not able to enter? More, it has become a vested interest of politicians. It has become a BJP versus Congress versus left. It is no longer a women empowerment issue, and that is what is bad, because they are trying to use women power and say rights of women to settle political issues. So Supreme Court definitely, by giving 22nd January and not making a stay, then it should have stayed the entry of women, so that there would have not been such a chaos which is happening, where people have come on the roads. It has become devotees versus women. Women journalists have been beaten up. I would definitely say it is a mess of a situation and something to be very proud of.
Okay, but you know, Padma Pillai, I'll come to you. And while I appreciate your sentiments, I think in a democracy, the best thing and the most beautiful about the democracy is that you and I and Abha Singh and Shrujit can have extremely polarized views, and we're supposed to respect each other's views. I respect your sentiment. I may not agree with them. But the reality is that are the devotees being made to play in the hands of politicians? I mean, look at the narrative right now. You've got the RSS and the BJP backing this. You've got a Rahul Gandhi who turns around and says, my personal belief is women should enter, but I don't entirely, my party doesn't agree with me. I mean, you are being played into political hands. This is no longer women empowerment. This has become completely religious interpretation of, you know, customs.
See, the fact is that there are two kinds of protests that are happening in Kerala and in many places in the 5 states in South India. And one are the continuing protests by the devotees like me, who are standing under no flag, no party, no banner, no nothing. And we are continuing with our protests in a peaceful manner. And yes, whenever there is a large collection of people, and especially in a place like Kerala, when there are outpourings of people's sentiments like this, the politicians have always been known to swoop like vultures and, you know, try to encash on the sentiments and other things. But that said, we have successfully remained independent of political interference, and we are not tools in anybody's hand, though the politicians are definitely trying to you know, do their own things and, you know, side with certain people and do certain things. That said, the issue that the public is talking about is not about the court judgment per se. The court has interpreted the constitution in its own way. Justice Indu Malhotra has had the different interpretation of the same constitution. It's the same constitution that she has read, and being a woman and about a woman's issue, you cannot call her a tool of patriarchy. She's a justice in the Supreme Court, where she has agreed with what we have said, the people of ready to wait. She has essentially agreed in her beautiful verdict. So she is not a tool of patriarchy, or she is not somebody who's, you know, trying to impose gender stereotypes and all. The fact of the matter is the Sabarimala temple and many such temples in Kerala are being governed by the Devaswam board, a completely autonomous constitutional body who is supposed to handle the entry and the stoppage of people and everything. And the court order, if at all, has to be implemented, it has to be implemented by the Devaswam board. But what has happened is that this government has stepped in and has shown overzealousness by being by unnecessarily interfering in the autonomy of the Devaswam.
But
and now the problem is that the Kerala government has filed an affidavit in High Court saying that it's a secular shrine. The second thing is that it is now saying that the devotees from Kerala who want to enter Sabarimala temple have to bring a pass from the nearest police station. We are not going to China. We are not applying for a passport.
Padma, give me a minute.
The devotees are now treated atrociously by the government of Kerala, who has...
Why is the Devaswam not being disbanded?
Treating devotees...
Disband the Devaswam.
No, 1 second. I don't want to get into that. 1 second. I don't want to get into a high voltage political debate here. The reality also, Padma, is that devotees are being asked to produce proofs of identity and residence is something that shouldn't happen. But the reality is that the same overzealous devotees did take law and order into their hands, and which is why we've had to have this review. But in any case, I respect your view, like I said early on. Let me take this back to Shrujit. And Shrujit, one of the things, you know, has the court in some sense, by giving into the agitator's demand, that it can, has it validated the whole attempt of taking law and order into their hands? I mean, you know, the judgment did open the gates of Sabarimala to women aged between 10 and 50. Many people celebrated this. There were others who denounced it. But in some sense, has the courts really, you know, taken, have the courts in some sense given into the agitation on the street? And is that a good, healthy precedent, is my question.
No, I don't think so. I don't think the court has given into the agitations on the street at all. In fact, these review petitions would have been filed even in the absence of those agitations. But if you look at the history of the Sabarimala case as a whole, there have been instances of women between the ages of 10 and 50 having entered the temple. And in fact, it was through a court's intervention that the notification ultimately came to pass, effectively prohibiting women aged between 10 and 50 from entering the temple, which was through the Kerala High Court's intervention in 1991. And this case itself, which the Supreme Court has heard, is not a new case by any means. The writ petition was filed in 2006. So it's reached its sort of normal, over the course of time, it's gone through the motions, and the court has finally taken it up for final hearing and come to pass a judgment. Now, of course, there are two plausible views that can be taken as a matter of interpretation, and Justice Indu Malhotra's dissenting judgment has to be respected. But the fact of the matter remains that the majority of the court has decided that this particular notification and the rule that permits the passing of this notification are ultra vires. Both the Parent Act, which is the Kerala Act of 1963, which allows people regardless of caste, community, gender to enter any public temple, and that it also violates various different fundamental rights of the Constitution. So I think this is a verdict that ultimately is predicated and is based entirely on an interpretation of the Constitution. And any other ruling, I would think, would have had all other kinds of disastrous consequences. If the court had held, for example, that the Sabarimala temple is a denominational temple, tomorrow all kinds of claims would be made for denominational status by different temples in Tamil Nadu, for example. Then where would the courts go then? So it might look like a impractical judgment to certain people, but I in fact think that from the perspective of the long run, if you take the long picture into mind, it's actually a practical judgment.
Right. Shrujit, just give me a minute. And Abha Singh, while, you know, in principle, I agree with the position that you are taking on this judgment, I still think there's a question that needs to be answered looking through the devotee's prism. And it's only fair that we raise questions on both sides. Till November 9th, according to the Travancore Devasam Board, till Friday, which was about 3.5 lakh pilgrims have booked for darshan through the Kerala Police online facility. Only 550 women from the hitherto banned age group of 10 to 50 years have registered online for prayers at the Sabarimala temple, given that the festive season begins on the 16th of this month. Does that actually endorse the petitioner's contention that women devotees are against the verdict, or the fear of a backlash and social ostracization is leading to this? I mean, you know, there is some amount of respect and truth in what the devotees are saying, and it's perhaps coming in from the devotees themselves. 550 women in a place where 3.5 lakh people have registered.
Let me tell you this, if 550 women, because who goes and visits the temples? Mostly rural women, illiterate women who cannot register online. So this is just a way to say that 550 women have registered because they are respecting the tradition. Issue is not tradition, issue is the Constitution, and when Article 14-15 talks of equality before law, it prohibits discrimination, and that is what the Supreme Court upheld. I would say the devotees and the Devasam are leading a revolt against this country. You are fighting the Naxalites in Chhattisgarh. You are talking of urban Naxals, but here are these devotees who without guns have brought the government to their feet. They are not upholding the court order. I say it is not only contempt of the court, but a revolt against the country, and the Supreme Court, when it hears the review petition, it must look into this matter, because if on the first time you allow such sort of revolt against a court order, there will be no law and order in this country. So it is nothing to do with women devotees not coming forward. It is because of the law and order situation. Women are scared to come forward, and only a few women who have the courage have had the courage to come forward. Women journalists were beaten up. Everybody can see on the television, and that is why the women, the feeble that they are, they have not come forward. Let us not fall into it that it is a denomination, it is a tradition, it is on. And when Amit Shah comes and says that you have not stopped the azan, it is on loudspeaker, and you are looking into Hindu traditions, it is all politics and nothing else now.
No, I think politicians need to be blamed on every side of the political equation. It's not just the BJP, the Congress for being ambivalent, you know, the left government. But I don't want to get into the politics of this. And I think Padma Pillai perhaps put it best, that politicians come in where there are political brownie points to be scored. It's a shame on this country that when this issue is being looked through the prism of women empowerment, there is still politics being played, even though I respect the religious traditions that are being talked about. But Padma, without arresting scores of devotees who were against women's entry into temples and allowing it to blow out of proportion, would it not have been better? And do you believe it was feasible at all for the government to negotiate and discuss the issue with all stakeholders? The onus was on the government to implement the Supreme Court order, which is exactly what it did. But Would devotees and would stakeholders be open to a conversation at all?
See, the devotees are led, what are the devotees led by? They are led by the devotion to the concept of Ayyappan, who has been consecrated in Sabarimala, and all the rituals and everything related to the temple being decided and maintained by the Tantri. The Tantri himself, who's also been given constitutional rights as per this, in our country, and who's considered to be the final word when it comes to ritual. The Tantri has very clearly said that it is not possible for him to keep the Garbhagriha open if there is a ritual violation. So when he clearly says that there will be pollution, there will be desecration of the temple when this happens, what do you think the devotees like us would feel, who have been devoted to Ayyappan and the Naishtika Brahmacharyam, the entire concept of the temple, and we are now being told that this desecration is going to happen. The Tantri is not on board with it, but the Devaswam then refuses to even buy time and find out methods, sitting with the acharyas, the tantra experts or anybody about how this issue can be resolved. They are not even willing to buy time from the court or to go back with a rejoinder, say that look, we are facing these practical difficulties for it and these are constitutional issues. The fact is also that, you know, unlike what was discussed earlier, the women of Kerala have, are considered very progressive, and we have read the orders and we have following the debates on TV. We know that there is a judgment by the 1991 High Court bench which instituted the check post at Pamba. Before that also the restriction was there, but there were no policemen checking identity cards. Now that High Court order has never been appealed. The High Court order still remained even when the writ was filed in Supreme Court. So there are procedural errors. The due process was not followed. So there are enough and more reasons for us devotees to feel flustered all around, where we have been let down and nobody is willing to answer.
Okay. I don't know if your protest is to procedural lapses in legal proceedings. I think this is faith, and I would respect that. I don't think it's procedural lapses, and I think you've got to be candid to say that. But Shrujit, without arresting scores of devotees who were, doing all of this, the question is that the CPM-led government arrested protesters in a midnight swoops of sorts. They couldn't prevent untoward incidents during the entry of women. Women, including activists and media, were beaten up. An all-party meeting has now been called. Do you expect this to bear any fruit, given the political repercussions of keeping this alive is perhaps enormous? And may I dare say that the issue is not being fueled in Kerala alone, it's being fanned by Delhi and every political party as well.
Well, I think it's unfortunate in that sense. But look, the Supreme Court is ultimately an institution that is there to review actions by the executive and by the legislature. And sometimes judgments that the courts do come out with are political in nature. They do have political ramifications. Ultimately, we operate in a democracy, and a judgment is also meant to be engaged with in that sense. But it would really be disappointing if, people were to disregard the rule of law entirely and commit contempt of the court's order. And I don't think you can only hold the CPM responsible for committing contempt in the sense of the CPM not being in a position to enforce the court's order, but a number of devotees who are prohibiting women from entering the temple, various different groups and organizations, including political parties. I think their acts have been far more contumacious than the acts of the government itself. And in fact, the government has said that it will try and do everything within its powers. Now, no doubt it's failed in doing so, but to ensure that women who do want to enter the temple are allowed to enter. And you mentioned earlier yourself that there were at least about 500 people that have registered online with the government to enter the temple. And I think even if one woman is registered, the fact is that that woman would have a fundamental right to enter the temple, and that's the right that's been recognized by the Supreme Court today. So it doesn't matter whether it's 1,000 women or 10,000 women or 20 women. If there's even a minuscule minority, and even if there's one woman who wants to enter the temple, she should be allowed to enter the temple. And that's what the court's verdict says. The court's verdict balances the rights of devotees who claim that they have a right to prohibit women from entering, and the rights of women to enter the temple independently. And they say that when there's a clash between an individual's right and a group's right, the individual's right should prevail, and that's how the Constitution has to be interpreted. That's ultimately the proper interpretation of Article 25 of the Constitution.
That's the American Constitution.
No, Shrujit, for me, it really boils I get that.
I'm sorry, it is not the
boils down to
American
a choice.
Constitution at all.
If even one woman in the... Yeah, and I think even for me, it boils down to the choice and the option to do it. Even if one woman in the age group of 10 and 50 wants to visit, she should be allowed entry because that is the word of the law in the land. But anyways, I at the same time, I respect religious sentiments. I may not agree with them entirely. But Padma, before I go back to Abha Singh, I have a question for you. In the question between legality and religion and laws and conventions, don't you think religious conventions are trumping everything else in our country right now? And this, I mean, you know, we talk of ourselves as this developing economy and we want to be a superpower, but will we let religious conventions rule over the word of law?
It's not ruling over the word of law, but I think it weighs quite heavily in every devotee's heart. Because that's the first thing that you learn along with your mother and father's names and other things, that who your deity is and who you worship. And I think that is something that the courts and the governments have to understand, that if you put a pile of wealth in front of a devotee and then ask him whether you choose your deity and the pile of wealth, a devotee would always end up choosing the deity, because that's not how, the logic is not how his heart works. And that is exactly the thing that we are trying to convey loudly through our voices on the roads. Women of Kerala are trying to convey is that this is a matter of something that is very close to our heart. And implementation, like he said, if one person wants to enter, Sabarimala, that person enters, and then that Sabarimala that we have had for centuries is lost, because Ayyappan's Naishtika Brahmacharyam is lost. And there is no longer Sabarimala Ayyappan, the Brahmachari, the Naishtika Brahmachari, the yogi who's sitting there is lost to millions of us devotees. So it's a balance that in our mind, that we are being treated unfairly, and that we have not been, both the governments, the center and the state, they have passed ordinances for far simpler things, for far minuscule things. But yet, they are not willing to listen to our voices. And we live in a democracy. We do not live in a judicial state. We live in a democratic state. And we are asking our people's representatives to come and speak to us and listen to us and make and do something for us. That's what we are trying to do. We are not trying to do anything unconstitutional. What we want is to retain our rights as devotees.
Okay, fair point. I think those 550 women who've registered, despite all the, agitation and all the resistance, are also trying to assert their right. But having said that, Abha Singh, very quickly, this is now a political hot potato. It is no longer a question of faith. It is no longer a question of women empowerment. It is a question of where does the political constituency rests and where can brownie points be made. Is this quagmire going to continue up until 2019? And will politicians ensure that this is exploited for their own purposes?
Absolutely. It is all because of the 2019 elections. Every party is trying to gather brownie points because of the elections. Otherwise, if they were very serious about women empowerment, this government, which in its manifesto said would give 33% reservation in parliament and legislatures, has kept quiet. 15 years have gone, but the bill for women reservation has not been passed. So talking of giving women equality by the politicians is just a gimmick. And now when Padma says that this is not a judicial state, it is a democracy, means you are attacking the fourth pillar of democracy. It is because of judiciary today we have democracy in this country. Let her not forget that. And by attacking this judicial process, you are spreading anarchy, and that is what is happening in Kerala. Supreme Court must look into it, and it is the duty of the government to ensure that women enter the temple on 17th, because there is no stay order. And if the devotees are taking a law into their own hands, it's better that they are arrested and army is brought in Kerala. But women must enter, because now it is not a issue of religion, it is an issue of respecting the apex court of the land.
Okay. It is no longer a issue of religion, says Abha Singh. I disagree. I think it is all about religion. It is all about faith. But you know what? You are being used by politicians, whether you believe in it, whether you are a rationalist or a believer. The politicians are making a case out of you, and beware of that is all I will say. But thank you very much for being with us. Sabarimala is always a fascinating discussion. It's one topic that I have very strong views on. I seldom voice my opinion, but on this, I agree with women empowerment. I would like to respect everybody's faith. I would want to, but I think it all matters as one choice. And even if one woman in the age group of 10 to 50 wants to go to Sabarimala, she should be allowed to go as a devotee. That's all that I espouse and war cry for. But thank you very much for being with us in this edition of the India Development Debate. We just hope that there is peace amidst all of this faith. We take a breather and we're back with Top 10 at 10.